Hey everyone, in this video we're going to take a look at another short Latin story. Now this one's called The Bodyguards of Xerxes, and it comes from George L. Bennett's Easy Latin Stories for Beginners. Now like I've told you before, if you've watched any of the videos in this series, what Bennett is calling easy stories for beginners, they're not necessarily easy and they're also not necessarily for beginners, right? I would say they're probably in that intermediate range. So my recommendation to you would be that you should probably try reading these if you're in, say, Latin 2 or 3, right? You have a couple years of Latin under your belt, just because there are some parts of grammar in them that just don't show up in that first year of a Latin curriculum. It might be a little bit tricky. But the reason I like to use these in my classes is they're a great way to break free of a traditional textbook or curriculum in general, right? You're probably not going to see these stories anywhere in your high school career, but they're great. They come from history. They might come from mythology. They might have a moral to them. So they're really cool stories and great ways to just break out and test yourself doing something new. They're always very short. They're only about a paragraph, give or take. And if you have the proper level of Latin under your belt, they're not too difficult to read. So they're a great way, like I said, to test yourself, practice, read something different. Sometimes when you're going through a Latin textbook, or curriculum, the stories can get a little repetitive or redundant. So this is a great way to just read something new. Okay, so this particular story is about the Achaemenid king Xerxes I and his famous bodyguard, the Persian immortals. You might have heard of them. So even if you haven't heard of this, you might have heard a little bit about Xerxes. He's the son of King Darius I, the king who went into Greece, invaded that first invasion of Greece, and they fought at the Battle of Marathon, right? The Persians versus the Greeks rather, in 490 BC. So Xerxes is his son, right? And he leads the second invasion of Greece, including the famous Battle of Thermopylae in 480 BC. So if you've ever seen the movie 300 or heard about the Spartans, right, in their last stand, that's who we're talking about here, right? Xerxes is the Persian king leading that. So this account probably comes from Herodotus. That would be my guess of where Bennett got it from. And it describes Xerxes' bodyguard as he goes into battle. Now, before we dive into the story, like I always tell you, if you really want to read and understand this story, you probably want to do a pre-read and get the vocab under control, right? Just try to figure out any words you don't recognize, look them up. So you have them. The other thing I'd recommend you do is doing the read and reread method, right? So read through it, write any problem areas you have down on a piece of paper. When you're done with the first read through completely, go back and look at what you didn't understand, try to fix it, and just keep repeating that process, right, until you can read it without any trouble. That's how you know you're ready to move on. You really understood it. The other thing I would always recommend is read it aloud. So if you're a student, try to find someone that you can read this to, have them read it back to you. That way you can work on your speaking, your pronunciation, your listening skills. That's all really great stuff to boost up your Latin ability. You never want to just kind of do it in your head. I'll start by reading it to you. Again, not that my pronunciation is anything fantastic, but at least you'll have someone to, or you'll have a chance to hear it from someone if you have no one else to read it with. Okay? So like I said, we'll start by me reading it to you, then we'll pause, and then I'll go through it with you, and you can kind of see line by line how this story goes. Okay? So the story goes like this. You have Xerxes, persarum regem sequebantur mille pedites fortissimi nobilissimique persarum, erectas lanceas tenentes, dende alii mille equites expersis selecti, et post equites peditum decem millia e reliquis persis selectorum, quorum mille in hastis pro imis cuspidibus, there you go, aurea habebant mala punica et relicos includebant. Novies mille vero, qua intra hos erant argentea mala punica habebant. Aurea vera a vero mala punica habebant, etiam illi, qui lancias in terram conversas tenebant, et mala aurea hi, qui Xerxem proxime sequebantur. Okay, so let's pause the video there. Again, at least you've heard it once. You might have a good chuckle at me stumbling through it. But still, you want to try to read it aloud to someone if you can find someone to read it to, or to yourself. Just practice reading it aloud. And if you can find someone to read it back to you, that's always a great way to work on your listening skills. Okay, so if you haven't done all that stuff we spoke about before, the prep work, pause the video, go back, double check it, and try to do it on your own. But we're going to move forward. I'll walk you through the story now. And as long as your translation is something in the ballpark of mine, you can probably feel like you understood it. Okay? So it starts with talking about Xerxes, right? So you have Xerxes, he's the direct object. So something about Xerxes, the persarum regem, right? The king of the Persians. So the subject here is mille pedites. So you have 1,000 soldiers, sequebantur Xerxes. They followed Xerxes, the king of the Persians. And these 1,000 soldiers are fortissimi, and they're also nobilissimi. So they're the bravest and the most noble of the Persians, persarum, okay? and they followed him, tenentes is your present participle, so holding their spears up, erectas lankias, right? They're holding them up in the air, so they're marching, right? That's how this bodyguard starts. Then you have the next part of the line where you have dende ali mille equites expersis selecti. So then another 1,000, right, following after this in his bodyguard, you have another 1,000 equites, so the horsemen, the cavalry, from the selected Persians, right, having been selected from the Persians. So you have selecti is really going with equites there. So they've kind of handpicked another 1,000 cavalry from the Persian army to act as part of his bodyguard. Okay. Then it continues with this. You have et post equites peritum deca milia e reliquis persis selectorum. So he said, and after the equites, the horsemen, you have 10,000 foot soldiers. So deca milia peritum, right? 10,000 infantry, basically. And they're described as selected from the rest of the Persians, right? So these soldiers are again handpicked, and these 10,000 are the immortals, right? So the famous immortal bodyguard. And you have the from the Persians, of whom 1,000, right? So mille in hasti, so 1,000. And to find what's happening, you have to go to Habeban. So 1,000 had golden pomegranates, is what they have, right? So the aurea mala punica. So they have these golden pomegranates instead of points at the end of their spears. So on their spears in hastis, right, they have the golden pomegranates instead of points at the end. So if you're thinking of a spear, this is talking about the bottom part. Instead of a point on the bottom, they have this mark that tells you who they are, and the rest, and the rest are enclosed, right? So et relicos includebam. So and enclose the rest is really how you'd say that. So you have these 10,000 spearmen, right? These infantry, the immortals, who have these golden pomegranates, and that kind of distinguishes them as being part of his bodyguard. Then you have the rest of the line here, where you have novies milevero qui intrahos eran argentea mala punica habebam. Okay, so you have indeed 9,000. So the first 1,000, right? Select one have golden pomegranates. Then you have 9,000 who were within them, right? Qui intrahos eran, had argentea mala punica. They had silver pomegranates at the bottom. So it's talking about the bottom of their spears, and you can kind of see it here on this. It's not really a mosaic. I don't know what you'd call that, painting, right? Whatever it might be. But you can see on the bottom that there's a distinct part of their spear that shows you who they are. So you have 1,000 with the golden pomegranate, and then you have 9,000 with the silver. Then you get the last line here. You have aurea vero mala punica habeban etiam illi qui lanceas interam conversas teneban et mala aurea hi qui Xerxes proximi sequebantur. Okay, so indeed, those also had golden pomegranates. So you have mala punica habeban. So those who, right, so illi qui, held their spears kind of turned over to the ground, right? So in interam conversas, right? They've been turned to the ground. And those who followed Xerxes, right? Qui Xerxes proxime sequebantur. So those who followed Xerxes closely had golden pomegranates. Okay, so it's talking about these soldiers who are following him, his bodyguard, what they have, how many he has with them, and this funny little element of their gear, which is the golden pomegranate on their spears. Okay, so this is a nice little story to read about, to dive into King Xerxes, right? It's not really about the invasion or anything like that, but it might kickstart your looking into that. So if you're interested in this stuff, I would highly recommend you take a look at Xerxes, the second invasion or the first invasion of Greece, with the Persians, Darius the First, all these great characters. There's a lot of great resources out there you can look through to find it, but I encourage you to look it up, right? Xerxes is a really fascinating character in Greek history, and so is Darius, by the way. So you should look them up, right, and try to see what this is all about, who the immortals were, and it'll give you an idea of what the Persian army looked like. Okay, if you have any questions at all on that, anything bothering you, feel free to put it in the comments below. If I wasn't clear on anything like that, I'll be happy to help you out. But otherwise, use this as a chance to boost up your Latin, right? Read something different, try to break free of the things you normally read in class, and hopefully you'll be able to do it. Like I said, if you can read through all this without any trouble, you know that you're ready to move on. But try to enjoy the story and use it as a launch point to look up, a really cool part of history. Good luck.